Good evening. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the March 2023 Curriculum and Pupil Services Committee meeting of the School District of Haverford Township. Welcome to everyone who has joined us here at the Oakmont building, and to those of you watching the recorded meeting later online. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now, Ms. Jen Zaxa will walk us through tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Wiedemann. As a strange turn of events, we're actually going to go in order that it's listed here. So we're going to begin this evening. We have three presentations. One is just an update on the strategic and comprehensive plans. The second reviews our PSSM results that we give, a survey that we give to students. And the third is a gifted program and curriculum review status update. So I will begin with, if I can make the clicker work, the comprehensive and strategic plan update. As you know, we have engaged in strategic planning. We'll go through the process that we engaged in to come up with our strategic plan, and then at the same time, we also had to develop a comprehensive plan that's required by the state. So we'll just do a little bit of a history, background here, and then we'll get started with the update. Anytime we talk about these strategic goals, we just like to remind folks that we did go through a particular process to get to our strategic goals. As you may recall, our consultant obtained input from our school district community and the wider community in various ways. There were over 4,000 surveys submitted, community forums were held, over 30 focus interviews were conducted, and the goals of all of those were to identify the priorities for our school district to pursue over the next 3 to 5 years. Our committee was consisted of representatives from all the different schools, all the different levels, folks who had been in district for a while, folks who were new to the district, folks who had students who had special services, gifted students, all sorts of variety of people. And this group of people came together and they looked at some resources that told us a little bit about what kinds of skills might be needed in the 21st century and beyond. They took a look at those surveys, the results from the focus groups, et cetera. They actually went through the results so that we could learn some trends that came up from the data, and used those trends to establish some goal areas and then create some goal statements. And then once we had those, took a look back at what our district vision and mission were to make sure they were aligned, and made just some very minor tweaks to make sure that both the strategic goals matched with the mission and the vision, or the pillars as we call them. And so the three areas that this group came up with based on all of that input were social emotional wellness, preparing contemporary citizens, and diversity and inclusion. And you hear these goal statements at the start of each of our school district school board meetings. Here are the mission and pillars that were developed, very minor ways refined. And I will take a minute just to read these aloud, because I do think they should be just a guiding force in how we listen to all of the presentations. The mission of the School District of Haverford Township is to educate and inspire a community of lifelong learners who become well-rounded global citizens. The pillars of our educational system are: our school environment is safe and nurturing. Excellence in education is a shared responsibility and partnership with all district and community members. Supports and conditions exist whereby all students have opportunities to grow and excel in the areas of academic, technical and career, and social emotional learning. Our decision-making process is student-centered and student voice is valued, and whole child development is vital to our educational system. So that's all about how we came upon our strategic plan goal areas. As I mentioned, the state also requires school districts to complete what's called a comprehensive plan, and that happens every 3 years. So I'll now define comprehensive plan a little bit for those who may not be familiar with it. This type of plan includes the elements that you see listed here, including an overview of the district, the development of a mission and values, which had been done through the strategic planning process, needs assessments that include looking at data, as well as surveys and talking with groups of teachers and students. All of that leads to goal setting and action planning. So you have to come up with specific action steps that you're going to do. Specifically, professional development and communication are required as part of those plans, and then monitoring the plan is another element that's required here. And the goal of comprehensive planning is really to ensure that all districts are using all of the data to develop plans for continuous improvement, which is something we were doing as part of our strategic planning, and then we could operationalize in this comprehensive plan. So how are those two types of plans related? Well, they're both based on that strategic planning input from the stakeholders. It was really interesting as we went through the data and looked at where are we performing well, where were the challenges, that the data said the same thing that the folks in our community said was important to them. You know, it said, oh, we need more, stronger programs for social emotional wellness. Well, that's what we heard when we looked at the data as well. So it was really an affirming process. Both plans are rooted in the mission and the pillars. Both address academics first and foremost, and social emotional wellness, as well as diversity and inclusion. And both require measurable goals, specific action plans, and related professional development. The comprehensive plan actually supports the strategic plan. We're going to go through a little update right now on how things are going in each of those goal areas. So I have this key here. We're going to use this in the next 3 slides. Items you see typed in black are the actual goal for this school year in that area. And then red is sort of our progress that we've made so far on this school year. And blue is where we think we're going to want to go for next school year, just to give you a sense of what you're about to see. So these slides will look a little familiar because when we report out on the plans, this is the typical format that we use. Comprehensive plan is in yellow on the left. That's the one required by the state. And strategic plan is in sort of red, rose maybe, on the right. As part of this is the Preparing Contemporary Citizens goal. So both plans address that goal. The comprehensive plan, one of the targeted action steps was to develop an MTSS period at the elementary level where we could provide targeted direct instruction. So as we reported in quite a lot of detail at the last meeting of this group, we are underway. We have MTSS running. We have tiers of support. We have ways that we collect data and the ways that we target instruction and monitor how that is going. What we're looking at for next year when it comes to MTSS is SEW, is social emotional wellness, is layering in a tier 2 support for those who need it for social emotional wellness that could be available during that time. And as well as to trial some tier 3 support. So right now, everybody gets the basic learning in their class. That's tier 1. Then during MTSS, those who need additional support get their tier 2 support. That's in addition to what everybody gets. Those who need enrichment get that in their tier 2 time. Now, there might be students who, even with that tier 2 support, are not quite meeting the growth standard that we want them to, or the academic standard we want them to. So then we're going to look at, okay, well, what do we do for those students, right? What's another level or layer of support we can give them academically? So that's what we're looking at for next year with MTSS. If you go to the next yellow block down there, another of our comprehensive plan goals when it comes to preparing contemporary citizens was to really focus on instructional strategies that work. So in this school district, we have been learning about and implementing elements of effective lessons from Mike Schmoker for several years. We sort of reintroduced that and rooted ourselves in that foundation again. We had several professional developments about that. We had orientation and induction sessions on it, faculty meetings. Those early dismissal days have focused on that. And we also have updated the evaluation tool. Pennsylvania updated that, the evaluation tool for teachers. And so we have highlighted with our administrators where the elements of effective lessons are in the evaluation tool, so they can highlight those when they're going and observing lessons and talking to teachers about teaching and learning. They're talking about the elements of effective lessons as they exist within that framework. So that will continue to be a focus of ours, like from now until the end of time. This is, elements of effective lessons. That's what we're here to do, is to learn and teach in the most effective way possible. Another of our goals was actually leading the use of those elements of effective lessons. So we make sure that that is a topic at our administrative retreat, at our monthly meetings with principals. And we talk about how do you supervise? How do you give feedback in the areas of elements of effective lessons? How do you help folks develop PD, professional development around it? So we will continue to focus on that, and that's, you know, what's written into the comprehensive plan. Next year, we'll also include highlighting what's called differentiation. So that means when you're giving a lesson to students, everybody doesn't necessarily get everything exactly the same. You might get an outline to take your notes. I might get a graphic organizer to take my notes. You might be able to take your notes freestyle, you know, depending on what might help a particular student with a particular lesson. And then we did also have a college and career standards goal. It was really more about record keeping than anything else and making sure we're reporting it. So we believe that we have our record keeping in place, and when it comes time to report the accomplishment of those standards, we'll be able to do so. So then when you look over on the red column there, the strategic plan, you're going to see a lot of similarities. We did talk about having common definitions for the terms that are in the strategic plan when it comes to preparing contemporary citizens, terms like critical thinker, problem solver, innovative designer. We actually reported out on that last May. That was part of our professional development last year. We also wanted to sort of not lay this at the feet of individual teachers to incorporate in individual lessons, but rather take a systematic approach to building in contemporary learning experiences to our curriculum. So we're doing so by taking a look at how do we modernize assessments. I would just reiterate, we are not talking about getting rid of traditional assessments. Traditional assessments serve a purpose. We need them. We are also talking about where are there opportunities to learn what students know and are able to do, and how can they produce those in a more modern way. So it's not only taking a paper pencil test, but it might be creating a website. It might be writing a letter to your congressperson. It might be attending, as you've seen in these board meetings, attending a school board meeting and being able to talk about that. So just looking at how do we modernize our assessments. So this will be reported out. We actually have a group that's meeting monthly about this. They've been doing research. They're reaching out this month to different student groups, teacher groups, other exemplary districts to see how people are doing this, community groups, et cetera. So we will be reporting out on that. I think it's May 18th at this kind of meeting, sort of where are we in including that in this curriculum process. And we continue to collect evidence of contemporary learner assignments that are currently happening right now. Lots of good things. I mentioned websites. We actually have a sports media class right now that has created some websites. They actually had to develop a company with a mission statement and make sure that that was communicated on their website. We have different, even just using different technology. In science at the high school, we have Pasco and Vernier probes. So these are probes that can collect data electronically in a much more precise way. So we're teaching students to use those so they can do so with many different experiences. We're actually measuring some of the what are called the 4 C's: collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, and which one am I missing? Collaboration. Did I say that? Communication. In engineering to learn, where students actually get to rate themselves about how well they worked in those areas. In math, we have a new data science course. We have computer science students participating in what are called hackathons. And so all kinds of sort of modern ways that we are including students in these contemporary skills. Okay, so if we move on to the next goal, diversity and inclusion, we have the same treatment here. Comprehensive plan is on the left, strategic plan is on the right. Going down that yellow column, you see our goals and our progress toward them. So the first section there talks about population representation in gifted and higher level classes. Our data showed that we did not have representative populations in those classes. Some groups were underrepresented. So we're looking at what are the barriers to getting students into those high level classes and those gifted programs, and how do we help remove those barriers, or, you know, sort of make sure that that program is more representative of the students who are in our schools. So our schools actually looked at their individual data over the summer and to understand sort of a baseline, and then they were spending this year seeing what are our practices for identifying students for those. Are there any students who are excelling that we are somehow missing? Are there students who have shown potential in other ways that we can nurture? And so those goals are being accomplished throughout the year. We've had some professional development on the qualities of gifted learners, and it turns out it's not, it's not just compliance. It's not what you might typically imagine is gifted learning. There are other behaviors that you can look for. So teachers are really taking their time and digging into what that could look like and identifying other students who might qualify. Now, we haven't even given what are called the LSATs, which is the regular screening that happens in second grade. So that'll happen, I think it's this month, right, David, or next month? This week? All right. We will continue to see, we hope, some levels rise in both those gifted and higher level classes. And we will continue to focus on those groups this next year, as well as taking a look at those with low socioeconomic status and making sure that they are being represented in the same way in those classes. You're going to hear a little bit more about professional development in the area of culturally responsive and dignity-based belonging. Each of our schools took on 2 strategies to help dependent learners become independent learners, and they had groups sort of dig into what it meant to use those strategies and turn around some professional development with their faculty. We're going to continue that work, and that is sort of the last 2 squares you see there, rectangles. You see there on the left is actually using that and then leading the use of those practices. The strategic plan on the right, also in the area of diversity and inclusion. You've heard us talk about the development of a Grow Your Own program. We have an actual Grow Your Own developer, Leon Smith, and I'm going to ask to show a video in just a second. The work that Leon's been engaging in this year. We've also been lucky that the Delaware County IU has formed a partnership with area districts, and we're excited about the participation there. Dr. Raimundos, Mrs. Carter, and Leon Smith have been encouraging and supporting student participation in there. Right now we have 5 high school students participating in what's called the Future Educators Academy in Delaware County. And there are 4 meetings scheduled for the year. They have a 4-day summer institute. And the goal is for students to gain leadership skills, to learn some strategies for college and career readiness, and to connect with professionals in the area. I am going to stop talking just to give you like a break for a second. So you can listen to Leon Smith, who's our Grow Your Own developer, and he's just going to share a little update on the work he's been doing this year.
Social studies teacher at the high school. Hello, my name is Leon Smith, and I'm a social studies teacher at the high school. And I'm also the Grow Your Own developer for the district. My work so far has entailed 3 parts. Working with the Future Educators program with the DCIU, conducting research and outreach around Grow Your Own programs, and also attending workshops and webinars to learn more about what's out there as far as Grow Your Own is concerned, Grow Your Own programs. With the Future Educators program, I helped with the selection of students for the program. We tried to pick a diverse group of students. We also worked with the students after sessions and debriefing with them with any questions they may have about teaching or educational careers, and also just the benefits to being a teacher. And also attending sessions at the DCIU with the students. And one of the sessions, I actually participated in a panel where students from the Delaware County schools that were there were able to ask me questions about my journey into education, why I became a teacher, and they really had a great opportunity to ask people at all different levels, whether they were assistant superintendents, HR directors, so doing that work. As far as attending workshops, in October, I went to the PA Needs Teachers Conference in Harrisburg and really started to participate in discussions around why are there teacher shortages, but also to figure out what other districts around the state are doing to fill vacancies, especially around the idea of alternative pathways. One of the areas I'm really focusing on is how we can diversify the educator pipeline. And research shows that many teachers of color enter through alternative pathways. And so grow your own programs really allow for that. And so one of the things that I've been researching is the idea of the CTE standards that the PA Department of Education has just released surrounding education and teaching. And so what we want to look at is how can we utilize these standards in creating pathways for students that are currently in school now, 11th to 12th grade possibly, where they could either go to the Delaware County Technical School or even maybe take a course here. And then the school itself could maybe establish an articulation agreement. And so I've started to talk to different universities about whether, we can maybe do some dual enrollment work. Because one of the things that we know is if we're trying to eliminate barriers, we don't want the cost of college to eliminate prospective candidates. And so if students can earn credits towards a teaching certification or an education degree in high school, that's going to limit the amount that they're going to have to pay as they go into their educator prep program. And then also I've met with a program called Educators Rising, and they have a grow your own curriculum that possibly could be infused with the CTE standards that have been recently released from PDE. So my work is continuing. It's exciting work, and that's where we are now.
So that's just a little bit about that first red box over there on the top. We do plan to continue our participation with the DCIU in the future, and Dr. Raimundo said we are also pursuing partnerships with local universities. Looking at dual enrollment, there are several colleges who are interested in that kind of work. It also helps with our graduation pathways if we have some articulation agreements. So there are lots of potential benefits for all students by establishing these kinds of relationships. And as we know, finding qualified teachers is an important part of our work. And so we're excited about that. The next two you see are really the same as the comprehensive plan. It's this idea of having professional development in the area of culturally responsive and dignity-based belonging. And so we've had some subcommittee work that actually is going to be shared, let's see, later this evening? Are you going to? No, that's the next meeting. Next meeting, Christina is going to share with us some of the subcommittee work on this goal in a little bit more detail. And then at the end of this presentation, you'll get a little video about what that's starting to look like at the high school. So as I said, each building is now learning 2 strategies. Next year, we're going to work on a couple more strategies until we've made our way through all of them. Again, in leading these strategies, we're looking to make sure our leaders not only understand them, but also can provide feedback and help folks implement them as well. So our last goal area is social emotional wellness. As part of the comprehensive plan, our goal was to have a social emotional wellness component of MTSS. And we have begun that work beginning in the spring of this year, January, February of this year. We have made some resources available to teachers to try supplementally with students to see how well they address some social and emotional needs that students might be coming up with. And just to be clear, these are not social emotional needs that would be seen by the counselor or require any of that kind of support. It's more like the social emotional needs that that are required in order to participate academically. So it's really the focus on like executive functioning and making sure that you can organize yourself and regulate and sort of those social emotional skills. And so our goal for next year is to either use those resources on a menu of potential supplemental resources, or if the recommendation from our teachers is that, these resources they believe are going to be good for all students, then look at, do we need to get them approved by the school board as an actual core resource that we would expect all students to experience. So we will come back to you if we believe that that is the case, and we will present those materials and appeal for your approval. When it comes to the strategic plan on the social emotional level, you may have seen the social emotional wellness newsletter come home. It's been at points quarterly and at points monthly. We're actually going to transition it over to a web page that has regular links to it in Haverford Happenings. But we've had quite a good response. Let's see, I have some numbers here. The newsletters average about 170 hits a month, which is nice. Folks are actually, looking at them and going back to them. We also, as part of this goal, included some screening and intervening using the My Savers. It was just a quick social emotional wellness screener, and students in grades 3, 6, and 9 took that. And based on those results, we determined if there were some students who might benefit from some small group work with a therapeutic counselor. And if that was the case, the counselor reached out to the families and said, found out if they were interested in that. We did have students participate at all levels. And typically that's about 6 to 12 weeks of small group. They work on skills and strategies for coping with the stresses of life, working on whatever it is the identified skill. And just as a little feedback, they do ask the students to rate themselves and their progress. And the student feedback forms thus far, students have reported that they feel less depression and anxiety, more control of their emotions, getting along better with students and teachers, and getting better grades. So that's, a self-reported piece of it, and it's part of the program, is for them to be aware of their progress, and then for the therapeutic counselor to be aware of their progress so she knows what to do as a next step. They could qualify for a second time or second round, or they may not.
Jen, can I just ask you a quick question? Who
Sure.
is providing the services because it's not our
Right,
counselors, who is providing?
Right now, at all 3 grades, it is am I using the right term? Therapeutic counselor from Neurologic?
Licensed professional counselor from
Licensed
Lakeside.
professional counselor. Licensed professional counselor from Neurologic. So I have spoken with the elementary counselors, and we are looking to see, because that means this one person is divided among 7 schools. So we've been speaking with the elementary counselors to see if, beginning next year, if that's something that they can provide. And so we're working on being able to incorporate that more regularly. Right now, she's funded by ESSER funds, and ESSER funds go away at some point. So we've got to sort of work in, how are we going to continue this program and support for students even when that goes away?
And this might not be the time or place for this question, but in terms of, as I understand it, the kid, and I'm sorry, I should pull this closer. Oops. So the children were identified via the screener. They're seen by the counselor from Neurologic. Did our guidance counselors, who would, obviously best know our children, have any say in who was maybe someone who who looked fine on the survey, but they could maybe use the little help? Did they have any discretion in getting children into these groups if they didn't flat out qualify from the screener?
They would have to qualify from the screener.
Okay, that's what
Otherwise, the guidance counselor, if they had concerns, could assist the student. But in order to see the licensed professional counselor, they qualified through the screener.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you for clarifying.
Right, but our counselors do provide intervention, small group, individual. They do work with students, and that's certainly something that they would be able to provide. They just would, this is sort of the kids that they haven't identified. It's like a safety net. A kid a counselor or a school teacher may not have realized needed some additional support, and this was how it surfaced that they may.
Gotcha, thank you.
Sure. So we do plan to continue to screen and intervene again in grades 3, 6, and 9 next year. That's what you see in blue right there. And then part of the strategic plan goal was also to continue with responsive classroom at the elementary level, and then start to investigate some restorative practices at the secondary level. We will be, that's ongoing. We have professional development in responsive classroom every year, typically during opening days and then through faculty meetings. That all happens at the elementary level. Really excited about and proud of Erin Smith-Dels's work with our lunch aides, also called noontime assistants or building assistants. The folks who are out there in the cafeterias and the playgrounds, she actually offers training in responsive classroom to those individuals. And it's, that's where the hard stuff happens. So it's really nice that they have the availability to be on the same page with what kids are used to being asked to do in the classroom. They're hearing the same language, they're having the same expectations. I think that's an important part, and I'm thankful to Erin for producing that for us. And we will be sharing more information about this at the next Curriculum and Pupil Services Committee meeting as well. So, while all of these goals are distinct and they're in 3 different goal areas, it's really our belief that they overlap in a lot of meaningful ways. Our high school team put together a short video to describe some of the professional development that really fell under one area, but in doing so, they ended up highlighting the connections between all the things you'll see here, the elements of effective lessons, having a social and emotional wellness aspect to the learning, as well as helping dependent learners become independent learners. So we're going to hear a little bit from them in closing.
Hi, I'm Tricia.
And I'm Sarah.
And we're here today to talk to you about how the teacher leader model supports our dignity work.
Our dignity work is founded in building relationships and helping students feel a sense of belonging. And that's really important for our staff as well.
The teacher leader model is particularly important because we can build on already established relationships and partnerships with our colleagues here at the high school.
This leads to more buy-in to tackle challenges together, increase our use of research-based teaching strategies, and engage with each other on difficult topics.
Because we're experiencing the same day-to-day challenges and opportunities with our own students, we can engage and more meaningfully in strategy sharing and problem solving.
Hi, I'm April Forgen, and I think that the most important thing to remember is that before any meaningful learning can take place, you have to create a safe environment, and you have to nurture and continuously build a trusting, respectful relationship with students.
Our work with culturally responsive teaching in the brain focuses on our dignity work in the sense that we are looking at all students from an asset mindset, that we're looking at diversity as something that adds to the classroom as opposed to something that takes away. And so our job as we're being culturally responsive is what barriers can we eliminate so that we can really reach the excellence that all students possess and that they bring to the classroom.
Hello, my name is Jonathan Howe. I'm a biology and anatomy and physiology teacher at Haverford High School. I am also a proud member of the Dignity Training team. My co-presenter and I found that the dignity training that we've been participating in directly connects with the district's goals of writing plans that include elements of effective lessons. One way in which dignity training directly connects with the elements of effective lessons was the checking for understanding, specifically quickly assessing student progress. Within our dignity workshops, we've explored feedback. The discussions about feedback seamlessly fit with the ideas from culturally responsive teaching in the brain. Our focus turned to making feedback instructive rather than evaluative, and specific and in the right doses, as well as timely. In this meeting, the team eagerly engaged and shared ideas for successful strategies for positive feedback that was both specific and timely. Teachers, including myself, left the meeting with new methods for implementing feedback that easily connected our dignity training and the elements of effective lessons.
When our staff focused on instructional strategies, we used the basic tools for independent learners checklist. We collaborated to identify how we could incorporate these tools into our lessons and conversations. Kid-friendly vocabulary, checklists and rubrics, tools to track progress, easily accessible data storage, time to reflect and process data, metacognitive conversations, and usable, actionable feedback.
Here are 4 unique examples of checklists and rubrics from diverse curriculum areas. They use kid-friendly language to help students sharpen their decision-making skills and focus on the learning process as they move towards meeting academic goals.
The 2 metacognitive conversations shown here foster communication between students to increase self-awareness of their task execution.
These forms provide a framework for usable, actionable feedback, allowing students to reflect, improve their performance, and build independence.
Our closing insight as we focused on using these tools was the importance of carving out student reflection time as mandatory instructional time.
Our goal is to facilitate students' reflection on their learning process so that they can be empowered to become independent learners.
And so there you have sort of just a little bit of a highlight how creating a safe environment can enable students to engage in the learning, giving them these specific strategies and planning them out, giving them the feedback that they need can really help build independence in learning. And once you have students who are independent in learning, they can really truly be lifelong learners, which is our mission and our goal. So that's sort of, I'll call it a brief update, but I know I talked a lot, but that's a brief update on, really all of the work that is occurring throughout the year when it comes to these two sets of goals and plans.
I have one clarifying question. With the LSATs, are they only given in second grade, or is there a point in time that we can test children who maybe have moved in, or we also know learning significantly changes for some students between second grade and other grades?
And I believe that David may actually address this later. Right now, I believe we only screen all students in second grade. Is there more to add to that?
So if there's a student that we believe, maybe gifted, that goes through the CST team at that point. But we only do the universal screener in second grade at this time. We'll talk about the gifted audit this evening, and we're awaiting those results, and we'll see if that changes at some point in the future.
Okay. Is it through teacher recommendation that it would happen, or is it through
Teacher or parent?
Okay.
When we look at data, there's a child, we have the MAP testing, we review data, there might be students that stand out when we review data.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Just thank you for a very thorough report. It's very easy to follow. And I just wanted to mention one thing. I really appreciate the addition of putting time in place for reflection on the process of learning. There's actually a lot of research at the college level that having a chance to be able to reflect on your process of learning helps with integrating that learning into it. So it's we're preparing them even for what we do in college, and really helping to solidify learning.
That's great to know. Thank you. Yeah.
I had a question for peer timeline standpoint. The strategic plans every 5 years and the comp plans every 3 years. Which year are we in now for both of those?
So the strategic plan goes to 25. And those
both
comprehensive plans.
they both
All
are-
right,
okay, I
so we're
thought
gonna have
so.
them both at the same time. Great.
That
No, but that's okay,
that
because they do
that
align.
15-year, I guess, multiply.
Yeah. Exactly. I should
Okay.
know that, the common denominator.
Yeah,
or
exactly. There
something.
you go. Okay, thank you.
Sure. And of course, we won't wait until 25 to
Sure.
begin engaging in those processes. It takes a year to build up to really develop those plans.
And I guess we're not ready to necessarily look ahead to 2025, but can you speak to kind of the plans before? I mean, it sounds like obviously a lot of work is going into develop these goals and implement them and assess them, and it's striking how embedded in our curriculum, our approach, our ways of interacting and supporting students these are. Did these just kind of start 3 years ago, a year ago, when these plans were done, or have these been kind of common themes and elements that reach back further?
Yeah, they build on that. I think the intentionality is what became very focused after the strategic planning process. But a lot of that was built, we talk about responsive classroom. There were teachers who were engaged in responsive classroom practices before we embarked on a strategic planning process. So what's different now? What's different now is that there's time that's created in the schedule, and everyone engages in that, and ongoing professional development is provided, where before it might be more an individual principal and teachers at that building were very interested, and they would focus their PD time on that. So now it's more comprehensive and strategic, looking at it from a system. And that's just one example, but other things were present as well.
Yeah, that's actually one of the components of the comprehensive planning is to look at your strengths as well. And the question is, how do you leverage your strengths to improve for all students and your systems? So sometimes that points us in the direction of, oh, this is working well somewhere. How do we make that system-wide?
Any other comments or discussion?
Does the state periodically change what the comprehensive plan is supposed to encompass?
And by periodically, do you mean every 3 years? Because,
I remember at some point way in the past, I participated, the first one I participated in, it was focused entirely on computer systems and data.
Yep. Yes, I've been working on the state's comprehensive plans for about 25 years, and they have evolved greatly in what they ask about. And I think that's part of their continuous improvement process as well, right? As it turns out that more things need to be looked at, we're looking at more things.
Did they actually provide any feedback to the plans that were
Yes.
submitted?
Oh, it's honestly, like, in past years, we have not gotten as much feedback. And so this was the first time in a while that they were able to just sort of ask some clarifying questions or say, hey, you didn't, make sure you are clearer about what this is. So it was nice. We actually got some interaction with them.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's nice to not, obviously it's not gone into a void because we are really focused on it and referring to it and using it, but to know that the state isn't just setting up these requirements so they can check a box, but are engaging with districts. And I think, the work that we're doing as a district, you see that the commitment to learning among the staff, and I would hope that districts would also get some of that support and modeling from the state system, State Department of Education too.
Sure.
I did want to just mention one more thing. We've had the topic of mental health come up a few times, and I just want to make sure that we point out that when we talk about social emotional learning and some of the things that you specifically mentioned that we're focused on, things like executive functioning, emotional regulation, organization, self-awareness, those are all core aspects and strong foundation for mental health, and this is really age-appropriate ways to be addressing mental health.
And trying to have several layers of it. So sort of
Absolutely.
something that everybody gets and then more for those who need more.
Absolutely, and the repetition of it as we're learning new skills, it takes time. All of those things, adults still are struggling with too, and so having that chance to practice those skills over and over throughout the day is a really important aspect.
Thank you. So sort of along those lines, if we're ready to move on, Christina Carter is going to share with us the results that we have from our PSSM, Psychological Sense of School Membership Survey.
And will you click?
Oh, I will. I can click for you. Or do you want the clicker? I'll bring you the clicker.
I'm like, you don't have to do the whole pass. I can always just tell you, but that's fine.
There you go. Thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. Now let's see how well I do with this. All right, thank you. Good evening, Dr. Rushi, Ms. Saxon, members of the board. I'm here this evening to provide you with an overview of our latest psychological sense of school membership, or you know it as PSSM. We recently administered it at the end of January into the beginning of February. Students in grades 4th through 12th actually participated in the survey. Yeah, thank you. That'll help. Okay, so before we examine the various aspects of the PSSM survey, it is important that we review what is the PSSM ultimately. This survey has been used in our district for the past 4 years, but has been used long before that in other places. It is used to measure adolescents' perception of their sense of belonging in our schools. The survey was created in 1993 and utilizes 18 questions that helps identify 3 substantive factors. identification and participation in school, perception of fitting in among peers, and generalized connection to teachers. You can click next. Thank you. Now that you know a little bit about what the PSSM is, let me share with you a little bit about our work with Catalyst through the University of Penn. We work with their Graduate School of Education to administer it and to review the survey. The value of this work has been instrumental in helping us collaborate with other districts who have also administered the survey and learn about what they are doing to address the problem of practice they have identified or are working to identify. We as a district have just finished the improvement science training, and we've participated in our second community group. So that's really where a group of districts all come together who are also participating in this, and we do a lot of thinking around what we're finding and what we're implementing across the area. We will continue to do work with this group, but we will also start with one-on-one coaching with the research assistants at the university. We as a district are fortunate to have individuals in the district that love data just as much as I do and really kind of geek out when it comes to looking at the numbers, and they will continue to help me as I go through the process of identifying what our focus is as a district, and they truly are talented individuals. Let me familiarize you a little bit with what the questions are. So we have 18 questions or statements that are asked of students using a Likert scale to identify students' level of belonging in different areas. Again, these questions are grouped in 3 categories: identification and participation in school, perception of fitting in among peers, and generalized connection to teachers. These questions or statements are administered to students the way they provided them to us from the university and not edited to ensure that the validity of the survey still stands. If we changed any questions or omitted, we are decreasing the survey's validity. The next set of questions that you're going to see, the students also answered demographic questions. The district was allowed to select between 2 detail levels of questions: low detail and high detail. For the past 4 years, we have selected low detail for our students in grades 4th and 5th grade. For our students in grades 6 through 12, we've selected high detail. As you can see, the low detail questions omit 3 and provide fewer choices for gender. We believe that these low detail questions are more appropriate for our younger students because they may not be aware of their lunch status, if they have special ed programming, or if they fit into other categories. So we selected that low detail to reduce the options for them as they go through the process. By the time our students have reached middle school, they are more aware of their demographic information. If students do not know the answer, they're just told by teachers, if you don't know what this means, it is likely that it doesn't pertain to you. Please just do your best to answer the questions based upon what you know about yourself. Teachers and staff leading students through the administration are provided with common statements so that when students ask questions, we keep the language consistent as they answer questions throughout the administration process, which is often common when giving surveys or administering assessments. Thank you. Now let's hop into our survey results. On this slide, you will see last year's participation across schools compared to this year's participation. In the red circle, I have noted the number of parental opt-outs by level. Parents were provided a chance to reach out to their principal if they did not want their child to participate in the survey. You will notice a significant decrease in the number of participants at the high school in comparison to the previous year. After inquiring with our high school, our students have vocalized and they've decided to self-select if they wanted to participate outside of what their parents even decided. So our high school staff have worked with them, which is why the number reflects the difference with that. We don't force anyone to take it if they don't want to. Now let's get into a little bit of what the data looks like when we go through it. So on this slide, you're looking at a bar graph that displays the sense of belonging students have by question. The dark blue and light blue show students who have a high or very high sense of belonging, and dark red and light red show a low or very low sense of belonging. Moderate is in gray, showing students having a moderate sense, and they're kind of the in-between group. I would like to draw your attention to our top 2 areas and lowest 2 areas of belonging. Our top areas of belonging are in questions 9 and 14. These ask students if they have teachers who are interested in them and if their teachers respect them. You will see that some questions are in the reverse, which means they just ask in a negative or positive throughout the survey. In question number 5, students were asked, which is kind of the reverse of what number 9 is. Most teachers in my school are interested in me. So it asks it in a different way. Compared to number 9, which was asked in the negative, teachers here are not interested in people like me. When asked in the negative, students showed a higher sense of belonging when asked that question in comparison when asking it in the positive. Our lowest areas of belonging are in questions number 12 and 4, with statements of feeling different than other students and their opinion being taken seriously. You will notice again that number 12, our question there, is in reverse as well. There's no question that really gives it in the direct reverse for students, but we can also look at and compare it to question number 18. Other students here like me the way I am. For 12, students had a lower sense of belonging, but on 18, they have a higher sense of belonging or acceptance from their peers. So we're seeing when you give it in a reverse, we see a little bit of different information based off of how students receive those questions. So I'm going to start walking you through the various demographic areas that they use to cross-reference with the belonging questions, and we'll walk you through those. Here you will see our sense of belonging by race and ethnicity to start. There is no surprise that in our data that the dominant or largest subgroup of students, our white students, have a higher sense of belonging. You may see that other subgroups may have a score higher than the dominant, but statistical significance in the survey says a group size or in count needs to be 30 for us to find some significance. It doesn't mean we disregard what those students are saying, but for the sake of data, when we look at it, we can't assume that that group speaks for the whole group. So we start looking at which group has an N size or higher. So it will require us to do a little bit more talking to smaller size groups. An example of this is our Pacific Islander students at the middle school who show a high sense of belonging, but the group was only self-identified by 2 students. So we can't assume that those 2 students represent all the students in the district or across schools. So that's where we would have to do a little bit more investigating. And as I said, we don't reject what they say, but we'll keep looking at ways of helping them to continue to feel like they belong as we go through the process. At our elementary level, we might need to ask some more questions if we looked at our Asian students who have a lower sense of belonging than their peers. At the middle school, we would need to ask more about our students who identify as other and Asian. And then at high school, we would need to ask more about our students who prefer not to answer or are multiracial. You may have noticed that I did not draw attention to some of the groups at the bottom area. If you see like the way the university reports out for us, if you see it in red, those bottom areas below the red often have the N count below 30. So that's why they've highlighted the red in comparison. To the next one, thank you. All right, for this slide, we're looking at the overall sense of belonging by religion. The same process would be applied to this demographic area. We always like to note that students are self-identifying their religions based on who they know themselves to be or who their parents have identified, who have identified a particular religion for them, and it may vary depending on how parents refer to themselves. So you'll see that reflected in some of the survey information as we go through. So, as we look at elementary, please note that the results for the first 4 religions have a singular count. Our largest N size, or our largest group of 30 or more, are for Christianity and Judaism, mostly showing a significantly high sense of belonging. We know that where our community is located, Christian, Catholic, or the Jewish community is a big community here. So that kind of reflects where we are geographically based off of the religions around us. This would be viewed as our dominant religion of the area. Our lowest sense of belonging comes from our non-religious students. The other religions below, although important, have singular counts as well, which means we need to inquire more from those student groups. In the middle school, Christianity and Judaism again represent the highest sense of belonging of our students in comparison to our students who identified Islam and others. This is really important for us to take note of. I would like to mention that today starts fasting for Ramadan. So when we really think about their sense of belonging being low, we want to be cognizant as a district that that's going on for our community as well. And how can we help them to feel like they belong even during this time where they're doing something different than their peers? In the high school, again, Christianity and Judaism have our highest insides and show a high sense of belonging. You will notice that religious selections become even more focused and specific as students are more aware of their religions or the religions that their parents practice and what their families may call them. The lowest area of belonging for our high school are our non-religious students. We'll continue to analyze these areas of religion and their intersection across various areas and sense of belonging.
Can I ask just a quick question? When it comes to religion, the question, is it an open-ended that they write in, or are there categories that they choose from?
So there's categories that they choose from, but then there's a other where they can write
And then
something
they write in what their preference is. Okay, thank you.
Yes. But that's a great question. Thanks for asking. That's where you see the differing terms. So you might see Jewish and you see Judaism. So those are the two differences. And quickly, I'll do an overview of our student sense of belonging by gender, noting that in the secondary schools, that's where the question has more of a focus. Our students who identified as transgender and gender nonconforming show a lower sense of belonging in comparison to their peers when you look at it. And again, you'll see where the red indicates the N size is the larger group, where if it's not on the below areas, sometimes their group size may not be big enough for us to draw a conclusion for that group just based off of the survey. And finally, our free and reduced lunch students also show a lower sense of belonging compared to those who don't receive free and reduced lunch as well, which can be understood based off of depending on if they feel like people may know that that's the status that they have. So now that we've had a chance to go over all of the different areas, I'm going to share my notices, but here are some wonderings as we continue to dig deeper and learn more about our students' feelings of belonging. Our district has seemed to maintain their sense of belonging overall from one year to the next. From when we look back to fall 2020, which is like, it feels so far away, but it really isn't, but we know what happened during that time, and compare it to this year. The questions, so if you look at it, it's maintained. It's only slightly different, which is pretty good. The questions that we're reflecting on are, what can we change about our efforts to help our non-white students see themselves in their learning and around the school to help foster this sense of belonging? I mean, you've heard the work this evening that our schools are doing, and that's very reflective of how they're continuing to strive to help students feel like they belong and show them that they have dignity within our schools and they have a place to belong there. Additional wonderings that we have are, how can we create a space for all students to feel that their religious beliefs are welcomed and respected? We kind of heard that when we looked at the survey and seen the difference of how students might feel about themselves in the bar graph. Also, what supports can we put in place to increase our non-binary students' sense of belonging and acceptance within the school? These are questions we are starting with, but we're going to continue to dig in and see if any other questions emerge as we continue to disaggregate the data. All right, on this slide, and please ask questions if you need to help you follow along, because we tried to lay it out as best we could for you to see it between cohorts over the years. You'll see our overview of students' sense of belonging between cohorts from year to year, and you will see the red line guide you through that data so that you can kind of look at a grade level and how they've moved through in their sense of belonging over that time. So, when you see the same fourth grade cohorts belonging from the 2021 to 2022 school year compared to their sense of belonging in fifth grade, you'll see that in the top area and see how their belonging has shifted. You'll see the same thing when you end up looking at the next row. We'll follow the sixth grade group from 2020, 2021 to this year, 22, 23, and see how their belonging has shifted over time. And lastly, if we look at it over a 3-year time frame again, you'll look at the ninth grade at the next line, and how it shifted to 11th grade, but the other lines are still aligned as well if you wanted to look at those. With the comparison of the cohorts, you will notice one thing. Students' sense of belonging has decreased as they matriculated through school. Please know that this is not a Haverford issue, but an issue at large. Research shows that 49% of students in the U.S. have said that they don't feel like they're a part of a school community. This same source says that once students leave high school, their sense of belonging actually increases. Also worth noting is that we have come out of a pandemic and 41% of the students say they feel connected to their peers, which is low. So that's an impact of the pandemic as well. And this is a national issue, but Haverford is going to continue to work on it the best that they can. Before moving on, just to note, as you see that has continued to decrease, we also want to think about secondary level where we saw that we had a lower number of students that took the survey. That can be very reflective that the students who feel like they have a lower sense of belonging decided to take the survey and give us their information, compared to the students who had a higher sense of belonging might have said, you know what, I don't need to take this survey at this point, and may have taken themselves out of it. So that could be a theory of why our scores look the way they do as well. You can move to the next slide. Thank you. Now that you have the information, the biggest question is, what are we doing about it? As we learn more about where we will focus our efforts this year, please know that we have been doing this work to increase the belonging for years as a district. You heard about it tonight. Ms. Saxa mentioned much of that work through our comprehensive and strategic plan, and that is going to continue to be our work and our focus for our students. Those steps are areas that show a level that the steps that she talked about tonight show that we are going to continue to help students with their belonging through culturally responsive teaching in the brain. So when we look at the research, they say if students have a warm demander, that helps them have a higher sense of belonging. So we're already doing that work. If you look at our elementary level, it says that you should use responsive classroom. We're doing that. We're having morning circles, focused conversations, teachers meeting with students around different topics. So we're already addressing what the research is telling us to do. And another area where the research is telling us to increase belonging is using restorative practice. And our middle school has been working on that, helping with peer mediations and increasing their sense of belonging in that way as well. Our final slide, if you haven't figured it out already about why belonging is important, let's go through why it's important. If students feel like they belong, they have higher engagement in class, fewer behavior incidents, stronger academic achievement. Our mission is to help our teachers learn how to foster that sense of belonging, to help students know that in Haverford, they belong here and they're important to us. On the right-hand side, you'll see a group of our students from the high school who attended the DVCEE, which is another kind of umbrella under Catalyst, and they attended a student leadership workshop at Upper Marion High School, if I remember correct, Upper Marion, and they were able to identify areas and problems that they feel that the students lack belonging in and be able to find ways to solve that issue. And you'll see our teachers are there with them. Many of those teachers, the teachers who went, were also in the slides in the videos tonight talking about how to increase belonging in culturally responsive teaching in the brain activities. That's all I have for you tonight, but we're going to continue to help our students feel like they belong in every way we possibly can.
Can I ask one more clarifying question? Sure. On the race slide, you mentioned that the numbers that weren't highlighted in red, even though they were lower, was because they had an end count of less than 30.
Yes.
Is that the similar cutoff with the other slides that is 30 the number
Yes.
that's the same? So we can assume categories that were highlighted have at least a number of higher than 30?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I had a question about the sense of belonging across cohorts.
Mhm.
Just curious, do we have any numbers, I mean, for national or for regional?
So we don't have the numbers yet for like kind of our regional area. That happens within our cohort. They're looking to, so we all are getting our data about at the same time, and the analyst is processing it out. And it's up to us if we want to share that with each other. So there has to be a collective agreement if we want to actually share and compare with other districts. So it just doesn't outright get shared with other people.
Okay.
I was curious about that too. And then looking at the same slide, there's a lot of ways to compare from year to year. One that stands out to me is if you look at the bottom charts, which show 12th graders from the class of 21, 22, 23. The 12th graders in 21 had a 3.8 score, and in this current 12th grade class, it's 2.8, which seems like a more significant change than I'm eyeballing on other ones. And I know you gave maybe one kind of possible explanation with the self-selection to take the survey or not, but I'm also just curious, like from the staff at the high school, is that something that's palpable? Like, do you look at this and say, oh yeah, this class just isn't as engaged or connected or is struggling in ways? And like, is that something that you, when you got that score of 2.8, like it resonated in some way, or is there a disconnect from the experience that's in?
So I would say, talking to the high school, they say that students are expressing more how they're feeling. And part of that is them choosing either not to take the survey, and that could be part of it. But also, some of the students are feeling more comfortable saying, like, I either feel accepted or I don't feel accepted, but we're creating a space where they can vocalize it, and they're being honest with us, and we're continuing to work at it. So those were also students that went through the pandemic, and the pandemic had a huge effect on it, which research is telling us. So that's another group that's leaving, and when they're looking at their sense of belonging in college, that belonging is shifting. So it's literally jumping up in numbers. So a lot of the separation for part of it could have explained their
Okay, yeah,
sense
it's
of
just
belonging.
interesting to like see a number and wonder, what does that feel like among the class? And, we get students here who present and talk about all the great things that are going on, and it seems like a really vibrant and exciting place, and I'm sure it is, but you see a number like that and wonder, what's causing that? And it sounds
It's
like
across the
there's
nation.
like all these different factors that are weighing in, and appreciate that students have an outlet and a way to say, maybe I'm not as okay as I want to be, or I need some extra support and help. But I was just curious about that
can
number, because
tell
it's
you-
the lowest one on on the page.
I can tell you, after going to the DVCEE Student Leadership Workshop, that students have some similar feelings, like sitting around other tables in other districts and hearing what they're working on. Many of the students are all trying to work on the same thing. So it's not just us, it's across the board that students are feeling that way. And then equity directors and different people who are doing the equity work with students, we're all like talking to say, okay, our students are saying they want to work on this problem or this problem, and it's pretty similar. So it just reflects the time for that group of students.
With the number of students who filled out the survey, on the chart, it was only the high school total number. Do we know, was the senior report, was their participation a lot less than 9th, 10th, 11th? Or
So-
was it kind of a common total, like 100 each or whatever, right? Was it a common, or was there much less in 12th grade?
So that's something we're still disaggregating.
Okay.
So the individuals who are working with me, so this is where, it's a little bit disaggregated, but it's still more aggregated than what, we're looking at. They're using the raw data to really break it all the way down so we could see it by cohorts. And then our goal is to have our administration go through and look at it in a more detailed way by grade level. So that's more information that we'll learn as we go along and can always share more with you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I do appreciate that this survey happens at all. I'm like just making a correlation to some work that I do with health centers, and there's one that set up kiosks in grocery stores where they had clinics, and it was a way to do a quick mental health check-in, and they called it a checkup from the neck up, and just kind of asked some questions that prompted responses and feedback for levels of anxiety or stress or depression, and then gave somebody the kind of the feedback and the way to vocalize to a medical professional, like, oh, maybe I should follow up on this. This told me like this was an area of concern. And I can imagine just the process of students being asked these questions leads to some of that self-reflection and understanding and trying to articulate, like, what is my school experience and what do I want to get out of it? And, then, the example that you gave of students then feeling empowered to say things need to change or, they need more support. So that's probably hard to quantify, in the
True.
data, but I imagine that it is also a valuable kind of side benefit of just taking the time to ask and like check in on the kids and see how they're doing.
We ask them and we listen, and that's the most important piece of it. And through the different work we do with our students, we're listening and finding ways to address things that they're bringing up to us. And that's what we can do as a district. And one thing I know the high school is willing to do, they're willing to listen and see. And many of the other buildings are doing the same thing. And principals are creating ways to address what they find in the survey. And they'll continue to do that this summer in their goals.
And to normalize it, to have that be
Yes.
a part of, the what it means to have kids that are able to be in school and thrive and do their best is having that sense of belonging and comfort in schools, and that it's, part of the conversation and part of the academic plan and supports for them, I think is an important way to just kind of embed it into our care for their whole sense of well-being, the whole child, and some of those skills that they'll need as productive, successful adults who also take time for their well-being.
Absolutely.
So I had a question. Thank you for putting all this together. It's very interesting to see. Do we do any type of survey like this, sense of belonging, with our staff? Just to check in on how they're doing and.
So, do you want to answer?
No, that's a great question, Danielle, because we have been asked about doing that, and that's what we're going to be taking a look at next year. Yep, there's been a lot of interest, particularly this past year, discussion about that.
Yeah, I think teachers, as everyone knows, they have so
All
many
staff.
demands on them, and staffing issues and just demands from parents, from administration, from all over, and everything's changing, and the success. Everyone wants our students to succeed, but without teachers who are. We're blessed in this district to have some absolutely, phenomenal teachers. But yeah, their happiness and their sense of belonging totally factors in, and the children pick up on that. So I was just kind of curious.
They
and
do.
that
They're
makes
very
me,
intuitive.
that excites me that's something that might be in the pipeline.
In the works, yes.
For next year. Thank you.
So should we do this for board members?
Anonymously.
I was just going to add, having participated in the staff back-to-school day and knowing some of the programming that happened and having the opportunity to be in our, bus depot and talking to the bus drivers that, the teachers obviously have a lot of connection, but how the district has also cultivated that idea that all the staff that interact with kids, whether it's greeting them on the bus in the morning or dropping them off, that they have the ability to make those connections and have the child be seen and have a trusted adult, I think was one of the questions. It doesn't have to be just a teacher, but great that, the programming and the messaging encompasses all of the staff who interact with our kids.
I was just going to ask a technical question. When is this actually administered, the timing of this?
So it was administered. So the first group that received it was elementary and middle school. That was towards the end of January, and then they had time into the beginning of February. High school, we waited to do it after the semester change because we didn't want to put that weight on our students while they were trying to do their finals. Our students study a lot, and they're very clear that they prioritize their academics, so we wanted to make sure that wasn't an additional stressor for them, so they did it the week after their actual class change. They did it the week of the class change when they were in their advisory period.
Okay, yeah, because I was just wondering too if that might have something to do with
Response rate.
response rates, yeah, especially for like 12th graders, if there was something kind of going on at that time, you know, it was whatever, I don't know. And
There
in
was one thing, do you want to go?
I just wanted to say, in prior years, we have given it in the October-November range.
Yeah.
So it's just,
okay.
it is, and it will be interesting to see if there's a trend.
Okay, yeah. And I was just, because the other one said fall 2020, and I was wondering, you know, if we're like in the doldrums of winter and everybody's just kind of like.
And I mean, they're in new
You know,
classes.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
That might have had an impact, like there's so many things.
So many
that could have
factors,
had.
yeah.
12th graders often kind of check out at the end of their senior year too, so that's the other,
No,
that's the other thing.
not our Haverford High School.
No, of course, no.
Never. But yeah, so I was curious about that. And then my other question was gonna be, how often do we administer this?
Once a year.
Once a year, okay, so it's every year. Okay, great.
You know, when what I'm seeing in the, sort of the postmortem on COVID in terms of education, I guess the two main things that I hear the most are learning loss and mental health issues. And, you know, learning loss is something that will be addressed over time, but it's nice to have a tool instead of just having an amorphous mental health category and saying, well, you know, how many safe to say calls did we get this month? You know, to have something like this that breaks it down and gives us some data to make some policy decisions on. So it's nice to see. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, then, thank you so much, Christina. We will now move on to our third and final presentation, the Gifted Program / Curriculum Review Status Update. And I'd like to welcome Mr. David Parker for that, and Ms. Nicole Battiselli. Nope, just passing off the clicker.
Passing
All
off the
right, there we
clicker.
go.
I was just gonna introduce David. This evening, thank you everyone. This evening, David Parker, my colleague, will be presenting on an update on the Gifted Curriculum and Program Audit. David is the supervisor of pupil services, and he has given leadership to the gifted programming in our district, K-12, and really helped facilitate this process. So I'm going to turn it over to David at this time. If you need help with the clicker, let me know, but I'm not great at it.
Try not to mess it up. Good evening. The mic always throws me off, I'm sorry. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening regarding our recent work related to the Gifted Education Program Review. As Nicole mentioned, the Pupil Services Department conducted a review of our Gifted Education Program, also known locally as our seminar program, in an effort to objectively identify areas of strength and areas we need to continue our work and focus so we can improve the programs we're offering to students. This review was conducted by consultants from the Chester County Intermediate Unit over a 2-month period, in which various stakeholders were interviewed, numerous classroom observations were completed, and a comprehensive review of files and documents was conducted. We anticipate CCIU will share the final report, complete with their findings and recommendations within a few weeks, and we'll use that information to help guide our work going forward into 2023-24 and beyond. My goal this evening is to provide you with a brief summary of the work of the process that was followed and share the guiding questions to help frame this work. Methodology. Our CCIU consultants for this project were Dr. Anuja Mukherjee, Supervisor of Psychological Services with CCIU, and Ms. Cheryl Everett. Cheryl is a retired teacher and administrator who spent her career in Chester County working extensively with districts and directly with PDE on the design and implementation of gifted programming over the last 25 years plus. Also, it's critical to point out that this work, first and foremost, was anchored in PDE's Chapter 16 regulations. Chapter 16 provides us with the overarching framework, and guidance for gifted education programming, and we routinely refer to Chapter 16 when making decisions to ensure we're in compliance with the regulations. Most importantly, we were focused on providing our consultants with high-quality data. We employed evidence-based interviews, structured classroom observations, and the consultants utilized a structured document review process to examine the artifacts we provided for this project.
Can I just ask a quick question? You mentioned the
Yeah.
PDE Chapter 16 regulations. Does the regulation require an audit? Is this one like?
No, ma'am.
No, so this is just part of our internal
This is
audit and review.
Professionally
performance.
responsible, in my opinion, yes.
Yep, thank you. Just wanted to give you a chance to highlight that this wasn't the state coming in and saying we had to do
No,
this.
this was Haverford being Haverford. I mean that in the best way possible. The gifted program review, besides being anchored in PDE's Chapter 16 regulations, was structured in a manner that focused on 4 critical areas: screening and identification, program design and delivery, professional development, and communication. We also highlighted how our program is currently staffed and structured to provide the audit team with as much context and information as possible before interviews with stakeholders started. As you can see here, we are fortunate to have 1 full-time gifted support teacher or seminar teacher at each elementary school, and we have 2 full-time staff positions at Haverford Middle School and also 2 full-time staff members at Haverford High School. These 9 individuals shoulder most of the workload with our gifted program, and they currently support more than 400 identified students K-12. Before the work started, each of the 4 areas of focus were further structured around guiding questions that align with Chapter 16 and underscore best practices in the field. For screening and identification, the guiding questions were: to what extent are screening, assessment, identification, and placement procedures for the gifted appropriate and aligned to current research and best practice? Are we using the most effective screening and evaluation tools for our district population? Thinking about all subgroups within our population. Are staff and parents aware of the district's gifted screening and identification procedures? To what extent are screening and or identification consistently implemented throughout our district K-12? Are multiple intelligences or multiple criteria being used in eligibility determinations, and is the practice consistent K-12? For the program design delivery, the guiding questions are here. I'm not going to read these all to you, but just to highlight some. To what extent does staffing patterns and resources meet the needs of the gifted learners? To what extent are services for the gifted implemented in a consistent and articulated manner across buildings and grade levels? And for professional development, these are the guiding questions that led to work. I'd like to underscore that our new teachers are oriented to the needs of gifted learners through induction. Are there opportunities for teachers and staff to collaborate for the purpose of planning and implementing instructional strategies for the gifted? And finally, regarding communication, these are the guiding questions for this subgroup. I'd like to highlight what is the philosophy and vision of gifted education at Haverford. It's particularly important to me. What are the methods used to educate parents about gifted students and gifted programming? So what's next? The following are the proposed next steps we're bringing forward to you this evening. We're anticipating any day the CCIU will provide the final copy of the Gifted Education Program Review. As soon as we have that, it will be disseminated amongst the leadership team and the gifted support staff for review and to be internalized. We'll then work to organize professional learning committees to be organized to discuss recommendations. And most importantly, the administration will share an action plan items and subsequent updates with the board through 23-24. So this will not be the first and last time you hear from us about the gifted review. It's a very brief presentation, but we are eagerly awaiting the results. So are there any questions based on the framework and how the process came forward?
I think I just missed, when do you expect to have the results for at least the administration to start to review?
Any day.
Okay.
I was checking my email. I was waiting for the meeting to get started. No, I wish I had it today, or any day.
Okay, great, thanks.
So as part of this review, are you anticipating that they're going to highlight sort of in response to these questions, like highlight areas, like we're doing this really, really well, and then here's other places where you could improve or try this. Is that kind of the
Absolutely
general
correct.
idea?
Yep. That was the whole function and purpose of it. And the guiding questions were not specific to Haverford.
Okay.
They're embedded, they're based on Chapter 16, but also the structured interview process, audit process from other LEAs that they've worked with over at least 15 years.
When was the last time or previous time that this gifted program was assessed like this?
So, I've been with the district for 14 years, and I do not recall the gifted program having a formal audit. The last time I recall, and Mr. Feinberg, I might defer to you, sir, I believe in the 08, 09, or 9, 10 school year, there was some gifted work. It might have been more focused at the elementary level, but I was new to the district at that time, and Dr. Lillian Finley, the Assistant Director of Pupil Services, was in charge of gifted. I just remember working with Lillian, and she was very much involved with that with Dr. Caldwell.
Okay, so it's been a while time for this to be reviewed and assessed, and we'll look forward to hearing what kind of recommendations.
Eagerly, yes.
Any other comments or discussion? All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So with that, our 3 presentations, really good ones tonight, are complete, and there is time on our agenda for public comment. Would anybody in the audience like to speak?
I did call and signed up.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, for committee meetings, we're not that formal, but thanks.
Yeah, I know. Can I stand in front of this instead of behind it?
I'm going to defer to Chris because we are recording it, and I think the microphone's going to pick you up better.
Hold on, microphone.
Get one smaller. I mean, President Biden comes out with a small one. Anyway, listen, before I start, I didn't come here to see this or anything, but I just wanted to let you know that what you're talking about tonight with the belonging is actually happening in our schools. This is the janitor, Miss Donna at Manoa, and she gave Johnny a Star Student bracelet because Johnny, what he learned at Manoa, says hi to her every day. And one day he just walked right up to her and gave her a big hug, and Miss Donna cried. And that is a miracle for us. And I was sharing with Nicole how well Johnny is learning to read with his reading specialist. And the reason why I came tonight is because I enjoyed so much last month the curriculum meeting, because you were using the word meet the needs of the students over and over again. For those of you who don't know, I used to run the Chapter 1 reading program, the Title I reading program then at University High School. We had as many as 600 reading disabled students that we worked with. And that's what we said 5,680 times a year, and we argued about in meetings every day how to meet the needs of students. And what I found, it is so important, and what I really liked is Ms. Vitale and what Ms. Snodgrass said when you talked about your own children and how the assessment and the regrouping benefited them because they had a safe space to go where they felt comfortable. You know, we always argue homogeneous grouping versus heterogeneous grouping. Well, there's no right and wrong answer, but the best answer is both. Reading disabled students need a class at their instructional level. They feel safe. In the high school, we used to have a movie, I forget the name of it, Joe Dorado, my critical friend, he's up there laughing at me now. But anyway, he had a movie about a high school student who could not read well, and the psychological, distress they were under all the time. And when we homogeneously group, we group kids, in the beginning the ELL teachers taught them. I taught the kids who read it second and third. They came from ELL. They were dyslexic. We had intermediate students, 4th through 6th. And we had developmental, which was 7th and above. And when you're in 7th grade, you don't need formal reading instruction. So we didn't carry them out, all right? I am very much opposed to high-stakes testing that we have today. It's the inappropriate use of a standardized test. They're good for two things. One, to compare yourselves to our students and what we do nationally and statewide and stuff, and for a screening of those kids who don't score well on those tests. We use the 25th percentile. But you need to have assessments like you showed last week to find out what they need and how to design instruction to meet their needs. It's a collaborative process, and it's a process of growth that happens over years, that you learn how to do things. We're all lifelong learners. I am learning for the first time in my life how to develop reading ability in an autistic child. You know, we're doing a great job in Manoa in doing that. I will say it again. Every autistic child should have a reading specialist at some point, especially early interventions work best. It's not just my little Johnny. I feel that way about his classmates. I see their growth every day. The highlight of my day, every day in my life, is when I take Johnny to school. I see him go to school with the other kids, how they accept him, how he has friends. He has more girlfriends than I ever had, and and typical kids, and they hang out over of them. It's happening in our schools, and we need to be proud of that, and we need to develop that and do it collegially, just like I saw last week. I loved last week's meeting because you said all the right things, and I love what Jennifer and what you said today about belonging, because it is about belonging. And, I worked in a large high school, and kids don't feel belonging in large high schools. And we developed small learning communities. That's what charter schools were originally thought out to be, small learning communities. They weren't designed, the charter schools back then were not to undermine public education like they are used today and privatize what is a democratic process. So I just came here to tell you how much I love that meeting last week, and I love the presentations that you had today, and the evidence is in my pocket. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Sarah Johnson, I'm a resident. I just had could we pull up the UPenn survey, just slide 6, the one with the religion? I just had a question on the middle school.
That was really fast.
Maybe there's a reason for this, but on the religion slide, I think it's that one. It looks like Christianity is listed 3 times. Well, it says I think Orthodox Christianity, and then Christianity is listed 2 more times. Is there a reason for that?
So for the older students, when it's listed multiple times is when they got to write it in. So it depends on how students hear it at home about what their religion is. So if they got to write it in, it came up as. Yeah.
But it's the same thing, right? So you're saying that it was listed differently if they wrote it as opposed to check the box?
Or selected it, yes.
That's strange, though. Don't you think from a data perspective? Because they're all selecting the same religion.
It's how students reported out about themselves. So if they might have wrote it in.
So you're saying they didn't check the Christianity box, but then they wrote in Christianity, so it's listed differently?
Yeah.
Okay. From a data perspective, that's very strange. And then on the gender one, on the gender question, I don't know if that slide is there. It looks like the middle school has a whole nother category. Right? The 3rd category under the middle school.
font is small, but under the third category, under the middle school, I see different identity, and that is one of the choices also at the high school, but it shows up as the 6th entry down.
It's a different order.
So that would be a write-in where they wrote in something, but it didn't.
No, in the middle school, they have different identity. It shows up as number 3. And then if you look on the high school, it's second from the bottom.
Okay, and the elementary kids weren't asked that question. And then I also have a question about, I guess, the demographics. Like when you go, I guess, the initial questions the children are asked, why are they being asked about their parents' education level? Is that for economic status?
Which one are you referencing?
I think it's
She's on slide 5. What questions are asked?
Yeah, initially I think there's
It's the one before that, I think.
It's, UPenn has different questions that, well, it's not even just UPenn. UPenn uses the PSSM survey that's been utilized, that has been validated in this format. But you're talking about the demographic, Chris. I think it's the next slide.
Next slide. Yep, that one.
Yeah, because it says, what
So
is the
is-
highest level of education that any of your parents or guardians have completed?
It's another way to identify a student's level of belonging. They just use it as another indicator. That may not be how we may use it right now, but that's another option as a way to cross-reference it for.
So it's not a socioeconomic question. Like, we're not assuming that if kids answer that question, saying that, their parents don't have a higher level degree, that's not put in as looking at their economic situation. We're just saying that those children might not feel they belong as much because their parents don't have a degree.
You can see which questions it's connected to, Christina.
We can check.
Okay. And then I think the other thing, was it clear to the elementary and middle school students that they could opt out if they wanted? Because I know there's a lot of question as to why so many high school students opted out, but I think it might have been clear to them that that was an option. Like if you're an elementary school student, you're not really going to understand that you can opt out.
I would have to ask more from the middle school about that.
Okay. Yeah, because I think it's hard to kind of, we're like making really, if we're using this data to make decisions, it has to be comparable.
One data point. It's not a sole data point.
Okay. I think the other thing is, do we know if the students felt comfortable asking some of these questions? Do we get any feedback from the students on how they feel like after taking the survey?
We have to ask the people that administered the survey.
The teachers.
Expressed it. So for some, it was the guidance counselor. For some, it was the teacher. For social studies, and others, it was their advisor.
Because I think I heard from the school board, there seems to be a lot of assumption that the high school students that opted out did so because they don't feel like they need to take the survey because they feel a sense of belonging, but I think that's a big assumption. I would dig into that a little bit more because, it's just, I'd be careful about making assumptions with this kind of data. All right, thanks for your time.
Ms. Carter, can I just, since you brought up, I did think during, but I'm like, maybe I'm missing something. So when, I noticed on the slide, Catholicism under the middle school and then Roman Catholicism, but they're the same thing. I'm Catholic, you can say Roman Catholic or Catholic. So you're saying on the form, was Catholic listed on the form, but then some kids wrote in Roman Catholic. So they're separated even though, okay.
Yes, because different students, when you talk to different students or when you end up looking at different religions, some students think Catholic could be Christianity, some think it could be Roman Catholic, others say Orthodox Catholic. So it depends on how their parents reference it at home. So that's a very personal way of how they identify their religion.
Okay.
There's Christianity listed twice as a thing. That's just based on checking the box right in there. Okay. Pretty close as far as.
And I know you said that you got this data, you don't have like the comparison data, you've got a team that's looking at it. I imagine there are ways to kind of slice and dice and group this and try to get the get a data set that gives you best indication, or that you can better make your set of findings and recommendations from.
Absolutely. So once we dig into it more, we can see if somebody wrote in the response or not, or whether they selected it. But that just takes a little bit more time for us to go through and see.
And I just wanted to clarify, when you were talking about the different potential options for the results we were seeing, I most definitely heard that as a hypothesis, not as an assumption. So I know you're
That's
at the
correct.
point of really trying to look at what are the potential options. You have a lot more data to go through. It's a hypothesis.
Correct. That's one of our wonderings.
All right. Is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Hi, I just want to thank everyone. It was a really great night to be here. I haven't been able to make a meeting before, so I really appreciated all the presentations and information.
Can I just get you to say your name?
Oh, sure. Beth Klaus. Thank you. Hi. I was thinking about the belonging inclusion, and I wanted to note I really appreciated in the newsletter the Haverford happenings, that like noting the different holidays and events happening, religious and otherwise, and I thought that was a great addition that I've been paying attention to. The other piece, which I think has come up a few times, and I know you guys just reviewed the attendance policy, but just in terms of belonging and inclusion, thinking about the different religious holidays that we have off because the way the holidays fall, spring break falls over Easter usually, winter break falls over Christmas, with you bring up Eid, happening, and fasting for Ramadan and Eid. I know that some parents have asked about those as days off, and I get that it's a data point. So I was wondering about how that data was gathered, because again, I think in the attendance policy, it says that to request other religious holidays off that aren't days that we already have off, that you have to write the principal to request that. It reminds me of like what you would do if you were taking a vacation and having extended, and you want to take an educational vacation. So I just thought that seemed like a barrier. So I get that families have a right to take a religious holiday off, but an added barrier of having to write to the principal seems like maybe not a sense of belonging and inclusion if you have to write, take an extra step to have that as an approved day off. So even though I know it's in the policy, but I was just wondering if, again, I think I had brought up at a previous meeting the idea of like on those yellow slips you used to be able to like check off, and I don't think religious holidays was on there, so a check off as opposed to a request to principals. So I just wanted to add that. So, thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay.
Hi, my name is Karina. Thank you. Excellent presentations. I have not been to one of these meetings before, so I apologize if this is something that has been brought up before. But there was no mention of special ed in the belonging survey. I don't know if that's something you look at. And also in the gifted survey, there was nothing mentioned about twice exceptional students and gifted students that also have disabilities. So it would be very interesting to either know where I can find information about that or to hear what you report out about that.
I think in the special ed indicator is available for students at the secondary level, middle and high school.
But there was no mention of any of
any
that category
report out of
and
the
their
results.
feeling of belonging.
Oh, okay.
And that's a
Thanks for
very,
that
very
clarification.
difficult part
Yeah,
for students
something
who
else to look
are,
at.
and I could also ask the question, how many students in the district receive special ed services? What's the percentage? Is a pretty high percentage.
It's about 16% of
So
students
it's
in the district.
That's a pretty significant.
Yeah, and we have the breakdown, but we haven't, that's, again, the data has to be segregated to break that down, because it doesn't do that initially from PSSM. But we do have people breaking that specifically down to see how our special ed students have reported their sense of belonging for the PSSM. And as far as gifted, we do have students who are twice exceptional. Our presentation tonight was just on the process of reviewing our program. So once we report out on the findings of that process, there may be more information shared. But this was just to go over the review of how we went through the audit process for our curriculum and program.
Okay.
But they are part of our process.
Okay. It would be interesting to hear about that. And I'm at the very end of, my son is graduating this spring, but this was a part of his education that I felt was very much missing. So, thank you so much. Thank you.
Anyone else here to speak tonight? All right. Seeing none, thank you to the staff for the great presentations and to the members of the community who joined us and participated tonight. Our business is concluded. We're adjourned. Thank you.